The emergency sirens wailed across the Cathara. Confederation's capital ship as another red dot disappeared from the galactic map. That was the fifth star system consumed by the Void Swarm this month. Ambassador Mira stood before the massive viewing screen, watching the last transmissions from the dying worlds. Families running through burning streets, children crying as their parents shielded them from the approaching darkness. Then nothing but static. "We're losing this war," whispered Commander Vel, his forearms trembling as he updated the casualty. "Reports the swarm doesn't just kill our people, it erases everything. Our planets, our stars, our very existence." Myra nodded grimly. The Cathara Confederation had been a beacon of peace for over 1,000 years. 7 different species working together, sharing knowledge, building beautiful cities among the stars. They had no weapons capable of stopping the Void Swarm. Their defense fleets were designed for rescue missions and exploration, not warfare against an enemy that turned entire solar systems into empty space. The council chambers buzzed with desperate voices. The Zalani representative suggested fleeing to the Outer Rim. The Corvani wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. The Thakari elders spoke of ancient rituals that might appease the swarm. But Mira knew better. She had seen the reports from the consumed worlds. The Void Swarm showed no mercy, accepted no surrender. It simply consumed everything in its path. That night, while others slept fitfully in their quarters, Mira made her way to the Forbidden Archives. These ancient data vaults contained records from before the Confederation's founding. Most of the information was considered too dangerous or disturbing for public access. Wars, weapons, extinct civilizations that had destroyed themselves through violence. Her fingers moved across the old interfaces, searching through dusty digital files, and she found it. A section marked Terran Sector Classified. The records spoke of a species called humans who had once fought wars across the entire galaxy. They had battled enemies that consumed worlds, faced threats that challenged reality itself. But 500 years ago, they had simply vanished. The files called them the Sleepers. According to the records, humans had withdrawn from galactic civilization after winning their final war. They had sealed their borders, gone silent, and never been heard from again. The Confederation had eventually quarantined their entire sector, marking it as dead space. But what if they weren't dead? What if they were just waiting? Mira spent 3 days studying every fragment of information about these mysterious humans. The records painted them as incredibly dangerous warriors who fought with weapons that defied understanding. They were also described as fiercely protective of innocent life, willing to sacrifice everything to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. When she finally presented her findings to the council, the reaction was explosive. Half the representatives called her insane. The other half accused her of wanting to wake something worse than the Void Swarm. But as another star system disappeared from their maps, even the most cautious council members began to listen. "We have tried everything else," Mira said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. "If these humans still exist, if they're truly asleep somewhere in that dead sector, then maybe they're our only hope. Because right now we're not just losing this war, we're facing complete extinction." The vote was close, but fear of the approaching swarm won. They would send a secret expedition to the Terran sector, searching for the legendary sleepers who might save them all. Mira's small reconnaissance ship drifted silently through the outer edges of the Sol system, its stealth systems hiding them from any potential detection. The council had voted against her proposal, but she couldn't let the Confederation die without trying. Her team of 5 volunteers knew they were committing treason, but they also knew their families would be consumed by the Void Swarm if they did nothing. "The radiation levels are off the charts," reported Kale, the team's science officer. His tentacles moved nervously across the sensor controls. Whatever happened here, it was massive. The entire system shows signs of some kind of reality warping event. Through the view screen, they could see the third planet from the sun, Earth, looked like a dying world covered in scars. Massive craters dotted its surface, some so deep they seemed to go halfway to the planet's core. Strange, crystalline formations jutted up from the continents like frozen lightning, glowing with an eerie blue light that pulsed in slow rhythms. "Life signs?" Mira asked, though she already feared the answer. "Nothing on the surface," Kale replied, "but the readings are strange. The planet's crust is riddled with artificial structures. Metal, energy signatures, something massive hidden underground. They landed their ship in what had once been a great city. Now it was a field of glass and twisted metal, with those same crystal formations growing through the ruins like alien plants. The air was breathable but tasted of electricity and something else, something that made their skin tingle. Mira led her team through the wasteland, following the energy signatures deeper into the planet. They found an entrance hidden beneath a collapsed building, a perfect circle of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. When they approached, the entrance came alive with soft blue glows, scanning them with beams of energy before opening with a whisper. The tunnels beyond were like nothing they had ever seen. Smooth walls stretched in perfect curves, lit by strips of light that activated as they walked. The technology was far beyond anything the Confederation had achieved, yet it felt ancient, as if it had been waiting here for centuries. "The energy readings are getting stronger," Kale whispered, his voice echoing in the empty corridors. "Dash, whatever's down here, it's huge." They walked for what felt like hours, going deeper and deeper into the planet's crust. The tunnels branched and merged, creating a vast underground network. Finally, they reached a massive chamber that took their breath away. The space stretched beyond their vision, filled with rows upon rows of crystalline pods. Each pod was the size of a small room, glowing with that same blue light they had seen. On the surface, inside each one, barely visible through the crystalline walls, was a human figure suspended in some kind of fluid. "By the ancient stars," breathed Vera, their engineer. "There are millions of them." The sleeping humans looked peaceful, but there was something unsettling about their stillness. These weren't ordinary people. Even in sleep, they carried themselves like warriors. Their bodies were perfectly preserved, but many showed signs of genetic modification. Its enhanced muscle structure, denser bones, neural implants that glowed softly beneath their skin. But it was what surrounded the sleeping chambers that truly terrified them. Massive machines loomed in the shadows between the pods, their surfaces covered in weapon systems and armor plating. These weren't just storage facilities. They were weapons of war, each one larger than a Confederation battleship, waiting silently in the darkness. "What have we found?" Mira whispered, staring at the endless rows of sleeping warriors and their mechanical guardians. Mira's team moved carefully through the vast chamber, their footsteps echoing among the millions of sleeping pods. The crystalline containers stretched endlessly in all directions, each one holding a human warrior frozen in time. The massive war machines stood like silent sentinels between the rows, their weapon systems dark but somehow menacing even in sleep. "Don't touch anything," Myra warned as they approached one of the pods. But curiosity got the better of them. Kale reached out with one of his tentacles to examine a strange symbol carved into the pod's surface. The moment he made contact, everything changed. The symbol flared with brilliant light, and suddenly the entire chamber came alive. Energy raced along hidden pathways in the walls, lighting up systems that had been dormant for centuries. Warning sounds filled the air, not harsh alarms, but something deeper, more musical, like the awakening song of some ancient creature. "What did you do?" Vera shouted over the growing noise. "I barely touched it," Kale protested, backing away from the pod as its blue glow intensified. Above them, holographic displays materialized in the air, showing star maps and data streams in languages none of them could read. The images moved and shifted, scanning across the galaxy with impossible speed. Then the displays focused on the Void Swarm's location, analyzing its movements, its consumption patterns, the destruction it had already caused. "It's scanning the galaxy," Mira realized. "The facility knows about the swarm." The ancient AI systems had awakened after 500 years of silence, and they were not happy with what they found. The holographic displays showed the Confederation's failing defenses, the consumed worlds, the approaching darkness that threatened all life in the galaxy. Warning lights began flashing throughout the chamber, and the mechanical guardians started to move their massive forms, shifting position around the sleeping pods. One pod near the center of the chamber began to drain. The blue fluid inside slowly disappeared, and the crystalline walls retracted with a soft hiss. The human inside took her first breath in centuries, her eyes snapping open with the alertness of a predator. Admiral Hayne sat up slowly, her movements precise and controlled, despite having been asleep for 500 years. She was a woman in her 40s, with short black hair and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of countless battles. Her body was clearly enhanced, muscles defined in ways that spoke of genetic modification. Small scars along her arms that suggested cybernetic implants. She looked at the alien visitors without surprise, as if she had been expecting them. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but carried an authority that made them all step back. "How long?" she asked, simply. 500 years, Mira managed to reply. "The galaxy is under attack. The void swarm is consuming entire star systems. We need help." Hayne's expression didn't change, but something dark flickered in her eyes. She stood up from the pod, her movements fluid and dangerous. Around them, more pods were beginning to drain. As the awakening protocol spread through the facility, "The void swarm," she said quietly. "We knew they would return eventually. We've been preparing for this war for centuries." Her fingers moved across a control panel that rose from the floor, and the holographic displays shifted to show massive fleets hidden throughout the galaxy. Ships the size of moons, weapons that could crack planets, armies of enhanced warriors ready to wake at a moment's notice. "You came seeking salvation," Hayne said, looking at the terrified aliens. But what you've awakened is something the galaxy tried to forget. We are not heroes. We are what happens when heroes fail." Chamber filled with the sound of more pods opening, and the galaxy's long sleep was finally coming to an end. Admiral Hayne led the alien delegation through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as they walked. The walls displayed flowing patterns of light that hurt to look at directly, and the air itself felt charged with barely contained energy. More humans were awakening throughout the facility, their pods opening with soft hisses as centuries of sleep came to an end. "You think we were defeated," Hayne said, her voice echoing in the strange hallways. "You think we fled from some enemy too powerful to face?" That's what we wanted the galaxy to believe. Mira and her team followed nervously, watching as the awakening humans moved with predatory grace. These weren't the peaceful traders and explorers that the old records described. These were something else entirely. Something that made every survival instinct scream warnings. "The truth is more complicated," Hayne continued, stopping before a massive blast door marked with warning symbols. "We didn't lose our last war. We won it. We won it so completely, so brutally, that we realized we had become the very thing we fought against." The blast door opened to reveal a chamber that defied understanding. Weapons floated in containment fields, their surfaces writhing with energy that seemed to bend space around them. Some looked like traditional guns, but others were geometric. Shapes that hurt to perceive, devices that existed in more dimensions than the mind could process. "We created weapons that could rewrite reality," Hayne explained, gesturing to a device that looked like a crystalline flower that one there can erase a star system from existence, not just destroy it, but make it so it never existed at all. The one beside it can turn a planet's gravity inside out, collapsing it into a black hole in seconds. Vera, the engineer, was staring at the weapons with a mixture of fascination and terror. "How is this possible?" Scientists said such things violated the fundamental laws of physics. "Physics has more laws than your species discovered," said a new voice. A man emerged from the shadows, his body covered in scars that glowed with the same blue light as the facility. "I'm Captain Jin. I've been awake for about 10 minutes now, and I can already feel the old hunger returning." Jin's appearance was unsettling. His left arm had been replaced with something that wasn't quite mechanical, more like living metal that moved like flesh. His eyes held depths that seemed to reflect other realities, and when he moved, space around him rippled slightly. "We didn't just fight in 3 dimensions," Jin continued, flexing his strange arm. We learned to battle across parallel realities, to strike at enemies that existed in quantum states, to wage war against concepts themselves. I once killed the idea of surrender on an entire planet. The enemy couldn't even think about giving up. Hayne watched the aliens' growing horror with something that might have been sadness. This is why we left. It's not because we were weak, but because we were too strong. Every war we fought, we won by becoming more monstrous than our enemies. We saved the galaxy by nearly destroying our own souls. The chamber filled with more awakening humans, each one bearing the marks of impossible modifications. Some had limbs that shifted between states of matter. Others had eyes that could see across multiple timelines simultaneously. All of them moved with the careful control of beings who had learned to contain immense power. We went to sleep too. Protect the galaxy from us, Hune said quietly. But now the Void Swarm has returned, and protection is a luxury we can no longer afford. The question is, are you prepared for what we must become to save you? The terrible truth was settling over. The alien visitors. They had come seeking heroes and found something far more dangerous. Their saviors were monsters. The galaxy was about to remember why it had feared humanity more than any other threat. The transformation was unlike anything the aliens had ever witnessed. What had been a tomb-like facility minutes before now, buzzed with activity that defied comprehension. Humans moved through the corridors with purpose that seemed almost supernatural, their enhanced bodies flowing like liquid death through spaces that bent around them. Commander Ara materialized beside Mira's group, her arrival so sudden it made them jump. She hadn't walked up to them or emerged from a doorway. One moment the space was empty, the next she was there, as if she had stepped through reality itself. "You're frightened," Ara observed, her voice carrying no judgment. "Good fear will keep. You alive in what's coming?" She was younger than Admiral Hayne, perhaps in her 30s, but her eyes held the same terrible weight. Strange tattoos covered her arms, shifting patterns that seemed to move when no one was looking directly at them. "How are you moving so fast?" Kale asked, his tentacles trembling. "How did you just appear like that?" "We've had 500 years to prepare," Ara replied simply. "Did you think we spent that time sleeping? Our minds never stopped working. We've been running battle simulations, developing strategies, preparing for the day when the old enemies would return." Around them, the facility continued its impossible transformation. Walls that had seemed solid revealed hidden passages. Floors opened to reveal weapon systems that rose like mechanical flowers. The sleeping war machines began to stir there, massive forms unfolding with movements that suggested they were more alive than mechanical. The Void Swarm era continued, accessing a holographic display that appeared in the air before her. "We fought their predecessors 3,000 years ago. Different name, same hunger. They consume not just matter and energy, but existence itself. Your scientists probably think they're some kind of evolved species, aren't they?" Mira asked, though something in Era's tone suggested she already knew the answer would be disturbing. "They're a weapon," Era said coldly, "created by a civilization that wanted to erase their enemies so completely that they would never have existed at all. The weapon worked too well. It consumed its creators, then everything else it could reach. We stopped it before, but we knew it would return." Lieutenant Tay approached from deeper in the facility, his unit following behind him. They moved in perfect synchronization, their enhanced bodies adapted for warfare that spanned multiple dimensions. Some of them carried weapons that looked almost normal, while others held devices that seemed to exist only partially in their reality. "Deployment is ready," Tay reported. "The Eternal Arsenal is coming online. Deep strike teams are positioning in parallel dimensions. The Void Hunters are awakening in the Shadow Realms." Ara nodded. "Show them what we've prepared." Display shifted to show the galaxy as the humans saw it. Hidden fleets positioned in spaces between reality, weapons built into the fabric of space-time itself, soldiers who could fight across multiple timelines simultaneously. The Confederation had been fighting the Void Swarm with conventional weapons. Humanity had been preparing for a war that would span dimensions. "You see extinction?" Era said, watching the aliens' growing horror. "We see Tuesday, This is what we were made for, what we chose to become. The galaxy created us to be its monsters, and we accepted that burden. Tay's unit began deploying weapons that shouldn't have been possible. Devices that could fold space, bend time, reach through reality to strike at enemies that existed in quantum states. The air itself began to change, becoming thick with potential. Energy. The Void Swarm made one mistake, Era continued, her tattoos now glowing with deadly light. They assumed we would fight them the same way everyone else did. They assumed we would try to preserve what we were protecting. But we learned long ago that sometimes, to save everything, you have to be willing to destroy everything. The war was about to begin. And the galaxy would never be the same. The first sign that something impossible was happening came when the stars began to move. Not the slow drift of celestial bodies, but sudden violent displacement as something massive pushed through the fabric of space itself. Across the galaxy, hidden bases that had been disguised as dead moons and asteroid fields began to unfold like mechanical flowers. Blooming in fast motion, Mira stood on the observation deck of the Confederation's flagship, watching her sensors, struggled to process what they were detecting. The readings made no sense. Objects the size of planets were emerging from spaces that had appeared empty moments before. Their mass signatures so enormous, they were creating gravitational distortions that rippled across entire star systems. By the ancient gods, whispered Admiral Zorn, the Confederation's highest military commander. What are those things? Through the viewing portal, they could see the first of the war giants emerging from its hidden base. It looked like a moon that had been weaponized by beings who understood the deepest secrets of the universe. Its surface was covered in cities that pulsed with energy, weapon systems that could be seen from light years away, and structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "That's the Eternal Vigil," said Commander Era, who had joined them on the bridge. "Captain Rena's ship. She's been waiting 500 years for this moment." The massive vessel moved with impossible grace for something so large. Reality seemed to bend around it, creating ripples in space-time that made the surrounding stars appear to dance. Other war giants were emerging throughout the galaxy, each one a mobile fortress world that dwarfed entire Confederation fleets. "How many people are on that thing?" Mira asked, her voice barely a whisper. 15 million, Ara replied casually. "All volunteers who chose to spend eternity preparing for this war. They've been living, training, and breeding for combat for centuries. Their children know nothing but warfare. Their grandchildren have been genetically modified to fight enemies that exist in quantum states." The communication systems crackled to life as Captain Rena's voice filled the bridge. Even through the speakers, her words carried an authority that made hardened military officers stand straighter. "Confederation vessels. This is Captain Rena of the Eternal Vigil. You are now under human protection. Maintain your current positions and do not interfere with our operations. What you're about to witness will challenge everything you believe about the nature of war." More war giants appeared, each one unique in its terrifying design. Some looked like traditional warships grown to impossible size, while others resembled geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. One appeared to be made entirely of crystallized space, surface reflecting images of other realities where different versions of the war were being fought. "The Void Swarm consumes matter and energy," Ara explained as they watched the giants take position. "But we learned to fight with things that exist beyond matter and energy. Time, space, possibility itself. Our weapons don't just destroy enemies, they edit them out of existence." The war giants began to move in formation, their passage creating storms of twisted space-time that made navigation impossible for normal ships. Planets in their path were gently moved aside by gravitational fields that treated massive celestial bodies like dust motes. "How do they move so fast?" Admiral Zorn asked, watching displays that showed the giants crossing vast distances in minutes rather than years. "They don't move through space," Ara said. "They move space around them. Reality becomes fluid when you understand its true nature. The Void Swarm thinks it's the ultimate predator, but it's never faced prey that can rewrite the rules of existence." The war giants approached the swarm's position. Space itself began to change. The very concept of distance became negotiable. The laws of physics, bent to accommodate weapons that had been designed to fight wars across multiple dimensions. The battle was about to begin. The universe would never be the same. The battle began not with explosions or laser fire, but with the sound of reality tearing across 17 star systems. The war giants opened fire with weapons that made the laws of physics negotiable. Space itself screamed as forces that should never exist were unleashed upon the Void Swarm. Captain Rena stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, her enhanced eyes processing data streams that would have driven normal minds insane. Around her, millions of crew members worked in perfect coordination, their movements synchronized like parts of a vast machine designed for destruction. "Dimensional barriers are down," reported her tactical officer. "The swarm is trying to retreat into parallel realities." "They can't run from us there," Rena replied coldly. "Major Q, deploy your assault teams. Show them what happens when they try to hide in dimensions we've been fighting in for centuries." On the other side of the galaxy, Major Q led his dimensional assault troops through a breach in space-time that looked like a wound in the universe. His soldiers moved through realities where the laws of physics were different, where thoughts could become weapons and weapons could think. Remember, Kyo spoke to his troops through their neural links? The swarm exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We have to kill them in all realities at once, or they'll just regenerate from the versions of themselves that survive. Void Swarm had consumed countless civilizations by being impossible to truly destroy. They existed as concepts as much as physical beings, feeding on the very idea of existence itself. But humanity had learned to fight concepts, to wage war against abstract ideas, to kill things that shouldn't be able to die. Admiral C coordinated the reality-warping bombardments from her command ship, watching as weapons that bent the fundamental forces of the universe struck at the swarm's core entities. These weren't explosions in any traditional sense. They were edits to the code of reality itself, deleting the enemy from existence rather than simply destroying them. "Target their quantum foundations," C ordered. "Make it so they never could have existed in the first place." The swarm fought back with weapons that consumed stars, turning entire solar systems into empty voids. But for every star they devoured, the humans created 2 more from compressed space-time. For every planet they erased, reality was rewritten to restore it from parallel dimensions where the destruction had never occurred. "They're adapting," reported one of C's officers. "The swarm is learning to exist in the spaces between realities. Then, we'll follow them there," C replied. "Deploy the concept killers. If they want to become ideas, we'll show them what happens to ideas that threaten humanity." Across the battlefield, human soldiers fought enemies that existed as living darkness. Creatures that were hunger given form, beings that consumed the very concept of life itself. But humanity had become something beyond life, beyond death, beyond the normal rules that governed existence. Major Kyo's assault teams moved through dimensions where time flowed backward, where gravity pushed instead of pulled, where the dead could fight alongside the living. They hunted swarm entities that had fled to realities where mathematics worked differently, where 2 + 2 could equal fear and darkness multiplied by hunger equaled extinction. "Contact," Kyo shouted as his team encountered a swarm queen that existed as a probability rather than a creature, arguing the possibility of its existence. The battle raged across multiple levels of reality. In some dimensions, it looked like a traditional space battle with ships and weapons. In others, it resembled a clash between abstract concepts, with mathematics and physics themselves serving as weapons. The swarm had never faced an enemy that could fight them on every level of existence simultaneously. As the conflict intensified, both sides began to reshape the very nature of reality around them. Stars were moved like chess pieces. Planets were folded through dimensions. And the space between galaxies became a weapon itself. The silence that followed the final battle was more terrifying than any scream. Colonel Nara stood on the bridge of her war giant, watching the aftermath of humanity's victory unfold across her sensors. The Void Swarm was gone, completely and utterly destroyed. But the cost of that victory had transformed the galaxy into something unrecognizable. Status report, she ordered, though part of her dreaded the answer. The swarm is eliminated across all dimensional states, reported Lieutenant Hayo. No traces remain in any reality we can detect. They've been ... edited out of existence.
Utter.
Nodded grimly. The humans had won, but winning had required weapons that never should have been created. In the Kepler system, space itself had been turned inside out, creating a region where the laws of physics ran backward. Ships that entered that area aged in reverse until they became the raw materials they had been built from. What about the inhabited systems? Nara asked, though she already knew the answer would be devastating. 7 star systems are completely uninhabitable, Hayo replied. The reality distortions are permanent. In the Vega system, gravity now flows upward. Ships fall away from planets instead of toward them. The survivors are trapped on the surface with no way to leave. The Andromeda sector was even worse. The humans had used a weapon that made the concept of distance negotiable. Now, walking one step forward might take you to the other side of the galaxy, while traveling at light speed might move you only a few inches. The inhabitants were scattered across dimensions, unable to find their way home. The Confederation. Fleet is requesting communication, reported the communications officer. They want to know when we'll begin repairing the damage. Nara almost laughed at the innocent request. Tell them we can't repair it. These aren't battle scars. They're permanent changes to the structure of reality itself. Some are weapons. Don't just destroy things. They make it impossible for those things to ever be fixed. Through the view screen, she could see the Confederation ships maintaining their distance. They had watched the battle with growing horror, realizing that their saviors fought with weapons that made the void swarm look like a gentle breeze. Reality-warping bombs that could erase the concept of healing. Dimensional weapons that made certain regions of space permanently hostile to life. Colonel, said her tactical officer, we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Surviving species are ... scared. They're calling us monsters. Ella walked to the viewing portal and looked out at the scarred galaxy. In the distance, she could see the twisted remains of what had once been the beautiful Centauri Nebula. The humans had used it as ammunition, converting its matter into weapons that existed across multiple dimensions. Now it was a wound in space that would never heal. They're not wrong, she said quietly. We saved them, but we destroyed their universe in the process. The galaxy they knew is gone forever. Her communication systems activated, showing her messages from across the surviving worlds. Fear, gratitude, and terror mixed together in reports. That all said the same thing. Humanity had become something more frightening than the darkness they had banished. The Thakari are sealing their borders, reported the intelligence officer. The Corvani are discussing abandoning their home systems. The Zelani are calling for a galactic council to discuss the human problem. Nara understood their fear. The humans had spent centuries becoming the perfect weapon against cosmic threats, but perfection came with a price. They had won the war by becoming something that could never again coexist peacefully with normal life. They asked for salvation, she said, watching another star system flicker with the after effects of reality-warping weapons. We gave them exactly what they asked for. Now they have to live with the consequences. The victory was complete, but the galaxy would never forgive them for what they had become to achieve it. The holographic message reached every inhabited world simultaneously, appearing in the sky above major cities like a giant projection of humanity's final judgment. Admiral Hayne's image filled the heavens, her battle-scarred face looking down at billions of survivors who had lived through the war that reshaped reality itself. People of the galaxy, she began, her voice carrying across space with technology. That made normal communication look primitive. The void swarm is extinct. Your civilizations are safe. But safety comes with conditions that you must understand and accept. On the Confederation flagship, Ambassador Myra and her surviving crew watched the broadcast with a mixture of relief and dread. They had gotten what they asked for, but the cost had been higher than anyone could have imagined. We are not your friends, Han continued, her words echoing across countless worlds. We are not your allies. We are your guardians, and there is a difference you must never forget. Friends can be reasoned with, allies can be negotiated with, but guardians make decisions based on what is necessary, not what is wanted. The terms she outlined were simple, but absolute. humanity would return to its self-imposed exile, withdrawing from galactic civilization as they had done centuries before. The quarantine zones around human space would be respected completely. No ship, no message, no attempt at contact would be tolerated unless specifically invited. "You will not study our technology," Hune stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You will not attempt to reverse engineer our weapons. You will not try to duplicate our genetic modifications. These things exist for one purpose only: to fight threats that normal civilizations cannot survive." On worlds throughout the galaxy, leaders struggled with the implications. The humans offered perfect protection, but at the cost of complete isolation. They would be safe, but they would never again be equal partners in their own defense. "Some of you are thinking about forming alliances to resist these terms," Hayan said, as if reading their thoughts. "Some of you believe that together, your fleets might be able to challenge our authority. I want to be very clear about what that would mean." The image shifted to show the scarred regions of space where the battle had been fought. Star systems twisted into impossible shapes. Areas where the laws of physics had been permanently rewritten, wounds in reality that would never heal. "This is what happens when we fight enemies," Hune explained. "The Void Swarm was something we considered a manageable threat. If you force us to fight friends, if you make us treat the galaxy's civilizations as hostile, the damage will be far worse." The message was clear. Humanity's protection came with the understanding that they were now the galaxy's apex predators. They would defend civilization from external threats, but they would not be governed by civilization's rules or limited by its morality. "We will sleep now," Hune concluded. "Our war giants will return to their hidden bases. Our soldiers will go back to their pods, but we will be watching. Every star system is monitored. Every potential threat is cataloged. When something appears that normal weapons cannot stop, we will wake." As the transmission ended, the massive war giants began their withdrawal. The Eternal Vigil and her sister ships folded space around themselves, disappearing into dimensions where they could rest without disturbing the fabric of reality. On countless worlds, people looked up at the sky with mixed emotions. They were safe, but they were no longer free. The galaxy had traded independence for survival, and now they would live under the protection of beings who would become more dangerous than any threat they faced. The new compact was simple. Humanity would be the galaxy's sword and shield. Never again, its friend. Peace was guaranteed, but it was a peace enforced by sleeping giants who would wake if their children were threatened. The galaxy was safe, but it would never feel safe again.